When you think about where the U.S. Constitution came from, you probably think of guys like John Locke, maybe Montesquieu, right? But what if I told you that one of the biggest influences was a document from right here on this continent, written centuries earlier? Let's dive into the incredible story of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and their great law of peace.
And look, this isn't just some fringe theory. This is from the U.S. Congress, on the record. Back in 1988, they officially acknowledged the massive debt the Constitution owes to the Iroquois political system. The founders were paying close attention, and they were seriously impressed. But to really get what they saw, we got to go back to the very beginning.
So, the story of the Great Law, it starts with an almost mythical figure, Decanawida, a man known as the Great Peacemaker. His whole mission was to unite the warring Iroquois nations under a brand new philosophy based on harmony and law.
And the legends about him are just incredible. They say he was born to a virgin, but his own grandmother thought he was a bad omen. She actually tried to drown him in a frozen river, not just once, but 3 times. And every single morning, the baby would just reappear in their home, totally unharmed. It was pretty clear, even then, that he had this single divine purpose, to bring peace to a land that was just torn apart by endless war.
But you can imagine, the tribes were skeptical. I mean, how could one guy put an end to generations of bloodshed? So to prove his message really came from the Creator, Decanawida proposed this unbelievable test of faith. He climbed to the top of a super tall tree right on the edge of a massive waterfall and told the warriors to chop it down, sending him crashing into the rapids below.
I mean, everyone was sure he was dead. But the next morning, some scouts see smoke from a campfire. And there he is, Decanawida, sitting there, perfectly calm, totally fine. That miracle, it just shattered all their doubts. The nations, the Mohawk, the Seneca, the Onondaga, Oneida, and Cayuga, they all agreed to unite, forming this incredibly powerful Iroquois Confederacy, all governed by his great law of peace.
Okay, so here's where it gets really fascinating. You just can't understand their government without first understanding their society. And at the very heart of it was a concept that was completely alien to European colonists. Their whole world was built around women.
Just look at this. It's Clause 44 of the Great Law. It's radical. Your identity, your clan, your social status, it all came from your mother. Women were literally called the progenitors of the nation. They owned the land. Everything, absolutely everything flowed through the mother's line. This organized their entire society into these powerful family groups they called clans.
And each clan had its own special responsibility. The Turtle Clan, for instance, they were the caretakers of the environment. And check this out. Their symbol was like a living calendar. The 13 big plates on a turtle shell, that's the 13 moons of the year. And the 28 little plates around the edge, that's the 28 days in each moon cycle. So cool.
Then you had the Gare clan. These were the medicine people. They were the keepers of all the sacred knowledge about healing plants and traditions. The story goes that the Creator himself gave them this responsibility because of their great compassion.
And the Wolf clan, they were the pathfinders, the ones who provided direction. Now, this wasn't just a spiritual thing. In the actual council meetings, they were the firekeepers. They were the facilitators who guided the political debate and made sure everyone stayed on track. So you can see how these social roles directly became political functions.
So, if your whole society is organized through women, what does that mean for political power? Well, this is where the Haudenosaunee system becomes truly revolutionary. Because the ultimate authority didn't belong to some warrior chief, it rested with the senior women of each clan, the clan mothers.
The power these clan mothers had was just immense, and it was all written down in the Great Law. They didn't just influence politics, they controlled it. They held the hereditary titles to leadership positions. They were the ones who chose which men would go to the council as chiefs. And this is huge. They had the power to fire those same chiefs. They also controlled all the food, which basically gave them veto power over going to war. If the mother said no supplies for the warriors, well, there was no war. Simple as that. And their power to fire a chief wasn't just on a whim. No way. It was a formal, constitutional process. A chief who wasn't doing right by the people would get 3 warnings. First, a private one from his clan mother. Second, another one in front of all the women of his clan. And third, a public dressing down before the entire council. If he still didn't change his ways, the clan mother would literally strip him of his title. Now that is a system of real accountability.
You can imagine European observers were just completely floored by this. This French missionary, Father Lafitau, he wrote that the male chiefs he saw were basically just spokesmen. They were acting as representatives for the clan mothers, who held all the real authority.
And that's not just some old historical observation. That understanding is alive and well today. As traditional Mohawk Brian Cole says, yeah, the men might be the ones puffing out their chests at the council fire, but it's the women, the clan mothers, who are the real power behind the scenes.
All right, so let's circle back to the Founding Fathers. They looked at the Iroquois system and admired all these ideas about federalism, checks and balances, personal liberty, but there was one massive foundational piece of the Great Law that they chose to completely ignore.
And this chart just lays it out so clearly. The difference is night and day. A Haudenosaunee woman owned property, she held real political power, she was the center of her family line. Meanwhile, under the English common law that the colonies used, a married woman was considered civilly dead. She couldn't own property, couldn't vote, and had basically no legal identity separate from her husband.
This is the actual legal doctrine they were working with. It was called coverture. A woman's entire legal existence was, and I'm quoting here, suspended the moment she got married. She was just absorbed into her husband's identity. So we are talking about two completely opposite worlds. The Founding Fathers, they saw the genius of the Great Law. They saw how it created this federal system that balanced the power of individual nations with the strength of a central council. They saw its dedication to freedoms of speech and religion. They absolutely borrowed those ideas.
But they left the other half of the equation behind. After the U.S. Constitution was ratified, it took another 133 years for American women to finally get the right to vote, a basic political power that Haudenosaunee women had held for centuries as a core part of who they were.
And all of this just leaves us with this one profound question. The founders built a new republic inspired by a model of freedom they saw right next door. But they only copied part of the blueprint. What might have been different if they copied all of it? What changes when the mothers of a nation hold its ultimate authority?